Oh, hello internet! Recently, Netflix released their new live-action adaptation of the manga and anime One Piece, and it went down very well from all quarters. I have not seen it yet, although I've very much enjoyed watching the reaction videos, and I'll get round to it at some point. As you can tell, I don't care about spoilers myself, although I won't be putting any in this video, so you don't need to worry about that. I've almost more enjoyed watching the online discourse surrounding the show though, and of course I have my own thoughts. For the purposes of this video, I will focus on one interaction I had on a video by a channel called Geeks and Gamers. I remember seeing some of their content around the time of Star Wars Episode 9, and although I agree that the Disney trilogy is very lackluster, I could not understand just how angry they were about it. Except I kinda can. Except I kinda can't. Let me explain. I have heard that Geeks and Gamers is one of the more spirited channels on that side of the culture war, to the point where I've heard one of their presenters described as a straight-up Nazi. I don't know anything about that, but I do remember he was very zealous in his attachment to Star Wars lore. But why? Star Wars is a property from only 50 years ago. It was a relatively low-budget sci-fi space opera, and one of its most enduring cultural contributions is an ever-expanding line of children's toys. How can anyone treat this property with such reverence? And yet, I believe them. And to some extent, I do get it. I have spoken before about Star Wars' connection to Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, and given that, it does not surprise me in the least that it has become a credo. Which brings us back to One Piece, and a bit of light trolling from me. Geeks and Gamers released a video with a thumbnail saying something like, "One Piece too woke?" But actually the answer was no. They, like many fans, enjoyed the show and thought it did a good job of adapting the source material. This commenter, which I think is the aforementioned presenter himself, said that the thumbnail was a deliberate troll to trigger the G&G haters. Sure. But for my part, if you're doing something only to trigger someone else, then that is a sure sign that you are triggered yourself. So I hopped in with my own little note, and here is the short interaction that followed. I assume their intention, my interlocutor broadly agrees with my assumption, and so I conclude that this is now the state religion of the ISF. To be clear, this is not meant to be a logically sound argument. And what is the ISF? It is the Internet States of Fandom. I tease, but it really does seem like the term canon is becoming more and more appropriate. I don't get it, but for the record, I don't get it when the ISSJ do it either, the Internet States of Social Justice. So what I was expressing here, and just to be clear, I was exploring it for myself. I don't comment with the intention of changing minds. What I was expressing was the sheer level of zeal that you see on both sides of the culture war. Both sides think that it is so existential for them that this escalation simply cannot be stopped. And sadly, in a way, both sides are right. On the other hand, there is more to it than that, as we shall see. Just to show my bias though, I do think that it is more existential for individuals from the ISSJ, simply because of the sheer level of vitriol and arrogant certitude that was directed at them by the traditional worldview from the start, although that does not mean that I wish to see them emulate that in response. Oh, and side note, if you think about it, it quickly becomes clear that there are people out there who are netizens of both the ISFs and the ISSJ simultaneously. So, as far as I present them as opposites, I am wrong. However, let me throw a bone to the ISF here. I know, you think that there is something actually sacrilegious about the way that some fictional works are being treated in the modern context. And to contradict my own comment, I actually do think I get it. The way that Disney Star Wars denigrated and dispensed with all of the legacy characters was, to me at least, farcical in its incompetence. But it is not wokeness you have to blame for this foolishness, it is capitalism. Disney is committed to locking down its IPs and ensuring that it can enforce its ownership before anything else. This was instigated by the previous CEO, Michael Eisner. We have no obligation to make art. We have no obligation to make history. We have no obligation to make a statement. But to make money, it is often important to make history, to make art, or to make some kind of statement. In order to make money, we must always make entertaining movies. And if we make entertaining movies, at times we will reliably make history, art, a statement, or all three. Bob Iger, the once and current CEO, took this on as an article of faith. The pursuit of making money and the mechanics of modern cutthroat capitalism, these are what has led to the downfall of Disney Star Wars, and of Disney in general. The homogenization of myth because they have no interest in making greatness present in the world. They have no interest in linking human consciousness to the world navel that is the source of the human spirit, but only in making money. And making money requires as many different eyeballs as possible. Capitalism will always embrace diversity. It cannot do otherwise. But they are not purveyors of culture, but of mass culture. And if you have 90 minutes, you can see exactly what I mean by that. So it is true, the ISF is losing something of its essence as its perceived cultural touchstones are being eroded. And this fact will cause genuine existential pain. I do accept this. But the ISSJ do have their own concept of the human condition, their own human spirit. And it is not wrong, it is not evil, it is not delusional, and it is not, at least in principle, committed to the total annihilation of previous cultural artifacts, many of which are much older than any fandom. Yes, to be sure, there are some woke scolds who seem to think that the old system has to be utterly expunged, but this is only because they are surrendering to the same kind of black and white thinking as the traditional worldview. This is right, this is wrong, right is good, wrong is evil. And where does this perspective come from? From the concept of hierarchies, obviously. And what of One Piece? Well, like I said, I haven't watched the full show yet, but my interest was piqued, and so I started reading the manga. I have read most of what is covered by the first season, but I understand that aficionados would say it has not really fully hit its stride just yet. So, caveat that I am commenting from absolutely minimal knowledge, but actually that's okay, because it turns out most cultural artifacts will be largely unknown to most people in the world. That's how that works. So far then, the One Piece manga is good. All the same story beats are there, but many of them are expanded or modified in ways that give them a slightly different emphasis. But it is also often extremely tedious to get through. Oh God, if I have to skim over one more repetitive exchange, or see one more final attack, or one more incomprehensible page of just movement, or listen to one more group of side characters explain what just happened. Apparently, One Pace is a thing, a fan-abridged version of the original which speeds up the story somewhat, and I believe it can be necessary, but even then, something will be missed. So what does that mean? Does that mean that Oda's original is actually bad? No. Does it mean that fans or TV producers have committed some kind of sin by cutting it down and shifting the emphases? Also no. And it will always be no. Canon is not canon. There is functionally no such thing as canon anymore. The very idea of canon has started to dissolve in mass culture. There are far too many opinions for any canonical opinion to actually survive. This is the true source of cultural annihilation, and it may indeed be genuinely dangerous to societies at large. The jury is still out. But for the individual in their own personal journey, it is irrelevant. Hence the term headcanon. And so, ironically, perhaps if we all learned to invest less in the dangerous state of the culture war, it would thereby become less dangerous, overcoming by surrender. Bye for now.